Hello, everyone. Welcome to Winning Strategies to Become a Gen Z Talent Magnet. This webinar is brought to you by Firstfruits Services and CANSO. My name is Nathan, and I will be helping to interview and moderate in this webinar. And many of you may have already heard of the idea that aviation needs to attract and retain a future workforce. It's been a topic that's been discussed at various aviation conferences. And we think that's a great thing that this conversation is being had. And the purpose of our webinar is to go a layer deeper than we can often go in those contexts. Many of you will know that the world of work is rapidly changing and the expectations of Gen Z are changing. And so, what we wanted to do was equip you with various approaches to implement in your organization to see change in this area and also to change your organizations in a way that can set you up for the future. So, it's our sincere hope that you walk away from this webinar with a set of new approaches and new ideas, and that you feel empowered and confident to implement these in your organization. And this webinar will be being recorded, so we'll be able to send that out to you after. And also, there was a short survey done before we even started, where no one said that they were good at attracting and retaining Gen Z, which I guess you can kind of expect. But it's good to see that there's a real interest here. So the flow of our webinar will be having two keynote speakers kicking us off. And then after that, we will be going to our two industry experts. So we'll be getting perspectives from outside the industry and then inside. And then we will create space for you to ask your questions. So as we're going through this whole webinar, if you have any questions that you want to ask any of the speakers, please put them into the Q&A in Teams, and we will get them and we'll be able to ask them, and we'll have an interactive discussion at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ben, who's going to give more context about Firstfruits and CANSO.
Super. Thanks, Nathan, and good morning and good afternoon and good evening. And a huge welcome to airports and ANSPs and airlines joining us from around the world. I had to recognize those different time zones in the welcome because it truly is a global registration from Fiji and New Zealand to South America and Africa and everywhere in between. And we know some people will be listening to the recording later on, given the time zones. It's a global challenge. My name is Ben. I'm the CEO here at Firstfruits. I was recently with a C-level executive who helps run an airport holding and operating company. They oversee 20 plus airports, and we were sitting in this round table, small gathering, and he was asked, "What is it that actually keeps you awake at night?" And you might think he would say operational challenges or slots or financial performance or difficult partners. But he thought for about a couple of seconds, 3 seconds, and he looked up and he said, talent. Retaining, finding that talent, it's the key issue for our executives. Everyone on this call, all of you joining this webinar, you can represent those who are tasked to deal with that challenge. Many of you might be in operations. Some of you will be more on the HR side, but you've been asked to look at this. You're super critical for the years ahead. But you also know, and we want to acknowledge it right at the start, there's not a silver bullet. This isn't a case of finding the magic pill that suddenly unlocks everything we need to do in attracting and retaining Gen Z. What we believe is that incremental and consistent and targeted change is what will work. It's what Firstfruits was originally set up to do. We exist to unlock change, and then we use our advisory services and products and things like that to do that across different organizations. We deliberately work across different sectors, looking to find the solutions and insights that actually act as that key to unlock change. One thing we're particularly excited at the moment is Next Gen Insights. This thing up here. It builds in part on what we've been doing with grassroots football, so completely separate. There's around 1 million who get involved in grassroots football in the UK, for example. And we did a stream of work looking at engagement and participation. It's really important because clearly there's health impacts, there's satisfaction of life impacts, there's community, and so on. Um, One of the things that we did was build an insights engine. We looked at we looked how to find interventions that made sense. Now take the lessons across into aviation. How can we find things that we can try, we can monitor, we can evaluate, and we can get the deep data that actually makes a difference? So that's kind of where we've been looking. But this event is part of a series that we really hope gives you something different. We wanted to pull together different perspectives. Those outside, I'm sure you're like me. We sit in meetings where we hear the same things, we see the same views. And so we want to challenge the norms. CANSO, the Civil Air Navigation Services Organization, have helped us in pulling together this series. They're the voice of ANSPs globally. We have a next webinar with them on the 9th of April, where we're looking more at the marketing and the messaging and the branding of how we look at attracting the next generation. So please do have a look at CANSO's event page for that. Unfortunately, our airline speaker regretfully had to pull out, but do not fear, airlines on the call. We're with IATA on their quarterly webinar on the 8th and 9th of April as well, so we'll be addressing airline issues there. What we do have today are some pretty amazing speakers. So I want to shut up. I want to hear the experience, the stories, the different contexts, the different industries which they all bring. So without any delay, I'll hand over to Nathan and we'll hear from our first speaker. Go ahead, Nathan.
Great. So I'm glad to introduce the first of our keynote speakers, who I also will be interviewing, Austin Okolo. He won't remember this, but around 6 or 7 years ago, I met him in my freshers week at university. He had just done a fashion show for the Afro-Caribbean Society where he was promoting his fashion brand, Born to Stand Out. And then I actually rediscovered him a year ago on LinkedIn, and I've come to find that he's become a thought leader and a key person of influence in the space of Gen Z attraction and the relationship between Gen Z and the workplace. And in 2021, he set up the Gen Z Club, which was an events company which was running quarterly events for Gen Z, looking at this issue of how do we equip Gen Z for the workforce and vice versa. And he's also done consultancy for various corporations in this space. So it's a pleasure to have Austin with us. Austin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I wasn't actually aware of that, so that's amazing to hear.
Um, Great, Austin. The first question I wanted to ask you, just zooming out a bit, many people hear the term Gen Z, and they understand that there may be shifts that we need to see to attract the next generation. But you created an events company called the Gen Z Club. Why do you think Gen Z has resonated so much with this identity of Gen Z, and in such a way that they want to join your club and feel united in that kind of shared sense of identity?
Yeah, so to give full context, obviously I'm Austro Okolo. I'm co-founder of an organization called the Gen Z Club and also founder of Gen Z Recruitz. So Gen Z Recruitz is focused on helping companies recruit Gen Z talent. And the Gen Z Club was an organization that me and my co-founders built to basically provide networking opportunities for Gen Z. So over the past few years, we've had over 5,000 attendees to our events. We've done events all over the UK, from Birmingham, Brighton, Loughborough, even done one in the Ministry of Sound. We do careers fairs, award ceremonies, real estate conferences, entrepreneurship summits, which are all around upskilling Gen Z talent and preparing them for the world of work. And through those events, we've also connected many large organizations like Lloyds Bank, Savills, Knight Frank, Barclays, HSBC, with the talent that comes to our events. So to answer your question, like I'm as surprised that the Gen Z Club took off the way it did when it first started. So I used to have an online forum where we used to give advice to Gen Z talent and Gen Z people. And people tune in on the app called Clubhouse. Many of you might not remember it. And then after Clubhouse, that app kind of died down. We thought, let's do it in person experience. So after about 6 months of doing the Clubhouse rooms, we thought, let's just try to do a networking event. Typically speaking, networking was seen for, older demographic of people, other demographic of people. But we thought, you know what, Gen Z, they deserve to network. I go to network events. I was often the youngest person going to the events, but I was going to them, so maybe others might do it. So we released tickets to our first ever Gen Z network event in August 2021, and we sold out in 2 hours, which was very different to what you might hear in the media about Gen Z being lazy, about being, unambitious, because this network event was actually to come and learn and to grow as a person. So after sending out our first network event, our next three, four, five, six were sellouts as well. And then, we ended up doing monthly network events to bring the people. And I think what that was at the time was the fact that Gen Zs, especially ambitious Gen Zs, are being tired of being told that they're lazy in the media. They're being tired because the way I look at it, you get lazy people in every generation. It's not unique to Gen Z. And there's in every generation, you get, cohorts of people with different interests. And in Gen Z, there are Gen Zs out there that do want to, work in aviation, or they do want to leave an impact in the world. And we create this space for those people that were actually passionate about being the next generation of future founders and leaders to come to and meet other like-minded people. I think that's what the key was. People wanted to meet like-minded people that they could relate to.
Great. I mean, a question that I had was, why do you think that there is such a noticeable problem with Gen Z trying to get into the workplace? I know that there's different contexts, regional contexts that people are in, but why is there a focus from organizations specifically on trying to recruit Gen Z in the first place?
Yeah, so I think there's just a massive disconnect and a massive misunderstanding. So I was in a very unique position for about 3 years, which is why I found a Gen Z Recruit, where I was speaking to my corporate partners, the sponsors of our events, the big corporates, but I was also speaking to thousands of young people. So I was hearing their perspectives and I was hearing their perspectives, and they were literally just worlds apart. So I just think that this has been a massive disconnect and a misunderstanding between the two parties. And I think we need to have conversations and bring those young people into the room. And to be fair, they're not even young. So I was going to say this earlier, Gen Z, that's 1997 to 2012. So there's some Gen Zs at 27, 28. People still think Gen Zs are about 15, 16. No, they're actually, going into workplace, getting managerial roles, etc. So I think there's just a massive disconnect between the two. I don't think they're being heard. I think there's a lot of assumptions being made. I just think that the conversation needs to be brought in house, and the conversations need to be had, and just like bridge the gap, which is what we try to do. Gen Z Recruit is actually bridge that gap, which I don't think is happening enough.
And could you give us just some stories that you've had working with organizations, and maybe like traditional organizations that are trying to navigate change in the same way that aviation is?
Yeah, so I'll give you a story, and kind of was a light bulb moment for me. So I'm an ambassador for the leading UK mental health charity called MQ, and we had like a discussion one time where we brought in different leaders around mental health to kind of discuss how we can, impact people's mental health in different facets of London. And then it just struck me for a minute. I was like, the very people that we're trying to help aren't even in the room. And that was a real light bulb moment for me when I realized that we're having these discussions in, this nice boardrooms, etc., and these nice places. And I feel like I see this in a lot of corporate industries. We have these discussions around how to attract Gen Z talent, and there's no Gen Z in the room. And I think it's quite simple, but it is very telling. And when I understood that, what we started doing is bringing the conversations into the room, asking our audience, what do you want? That's not you saying you're gonna bend to whatever Gen Z want. I don't agree with that either. But it's about having that two-way conversation. So what we started doing was actually researching, what our audience actually looks for in the workplace. And it was very different to what the corporations that were hiring thought it was. So, there's a stereotypical thing of Gen Zs love companies that are environmentally conscious, which is also very important. But from our research, the number one thing that Gen Z is looking for is actually remote working and flexible working. Number two was learning and mentorship, and number three was competitive salaries. So unless you ask them these questions, they don't know that. So what we do is we do a lot of reverse mentoring and actually bringing Gen Zs in discussion and doing research around what it is that the person you're trying to attract is actually looking for. And I think that's one of the ways that we've helped support organizations.
And what kind of organizations were trying this out?
Yeah, so we've got through. So we've got like lots of Lloyds that we bring in to kind of bring their discussion in house with them, where they can kind of ask Gen Z directly. There was a marketing agency that we worked with as well, where we did training, and before that training, we actually directly asked the people in our organization what was it about their organization that would kind of put you off from working there as well. So those are various things, but I think as I mentioned, it is a two-way conversation, because what we allowed in that conversation between the two parties was we found that although Gen Zs are looking for this one thing, the companies had another perspective as to why they do certain things. So, for example, Gen Z might say, we want flexible work conditions. And then they might say, well, as a market agency, we feel as though that, we want you in-house because the best ideas are shared in person. And as you know, the in-person connection is important. And what that actually did was to the people listening was that, okay, I understand it now. So it's not about you want to come to the office because you want to spend loads of money to come to London. It's more about that side of things. So I just think that creating those spaces for those two-way conversations is what we've done and what I want to see more companies doing.
That's great. That's great. And I think you have experience going into schools and giving sort of, I guess, lectures or talks there. And like you said, there's a massive divide, well, not divide, but range of Gen Z where you've got older Gen Z in their mid to late 20s and you've got younger Gen Z, maybe at A level sort of route. And in aviation, we've got this issue where you've got current needs of attraction and then also trying to set up for the future. With your work in schools and how you're interacting with kids, is there anything that you've seen organizations do well in interacting with those demographics?
Yeah, so I think my answer might be a bit unconventional. So I think when it comes to recruitment, especially when it comes to like niche industries, you need to be extremely intentional. And I feel like what I don't see from corporates enough, and I'm always talk about this, is not enough intent when they go into recruitment. So they might just go into a school, for example, and they just think that I'll go into a school, I'll talk about what we do, and we'll get flooded with applications. That's not how it works. Like, if you go into an aviation specific school, that might work. So I think the issue that I found in the schools is that I think it's a good way to get the top brand awareness, but it isn't really going to bring you mass, in my opinion, mass applications because the people you're going to school with, they might not have any sort of interest in where you're going. And I think what I found, so the reason with our network event, Gen Z Club, we had a lot of corporates come in to have stalls at our events, for example, and the response that they get at our event is a lot different to what they might get in the school. And the reason being, to come to a Gen Z event or Gen Z Recruits event, you need to actually sign up to it. There was a ticket fee. Sometimes there's applications to get in. So everyone there has put in some form of commitment to come. So which means they're very, very hungry to attend. So whereas in schools, they might not always appreciate what they have because they're forced to come into school, they don't always appreciate it. So what I would actually urge organizations to do is find communities of people that are actually passionate about what you do. There's so many aviation communities out there that are passionate about aviation. There's no point going to a school where their interests lie in, finance or marketing and trying to pull them over. Like I think the amount of time you might spend trying to convince a no, you can go and find a yes. And we live in a time now with social media where there's so many different communities. I've got my own community, there's aviation communities out there. And I think that's where people should actually be focused on. So I think, stereotypically schools, universities has been an area where people look for. But the issue with that, as I mentioned before, is that they don't always appreciate what it is there and it isn't intentional enough and it isn't niche specific. Whereas I'd rather a company like an aviation companies or airport companies go and find that influencer that has got people that are following him to get into aviation. Go and find that community where we talk about aviation because what you'll have there is a group of people that are actually passionate about what you're doing. I think when it comes to early careers, so much of it is just like having that passion because the rest, there's other stuff you can teach them, the nitty gritty, the skills, you can learn that. But if you don't have the hunger, then there's no conversation to even be had. So I think you want to find people that are passionate and hungry to actually get into sector in the first place. And I think that can be done by finding people that are already doing things. I read a book, Elon Musk, I read this book a while ago. And if you look and funny enough, like he's got a business, SpaceX, which does aviation and aerospace, etc. And they done little synopsis around the people that they hired for the organization SpaceX. And what you read about those people is that they were building rocket ships from the age of 13. So even before they knew they can even get a career in aerospace, they were still doing things around of that nature. And there's people out there that might not know about aviation sector or about how to get a career in it, but they're already looking at planes, researching planes, they're already, and that's who you want in your organization. I think that's why I urge more companies to find those communities of people that are passionate about this sector, as opposed to going to other sectors, other places, and trying to convince someone to come and work here when there's people out there that literally would love the opportunity.
That's really helpful. I think we might come back on that topic later on, but I wanted to ask you, how have you seen? I mean, you talked about reverse mentoring. How have you seen organizations effectively listen to the Gen Z voice and change like how they're operating to be more attractive?
So one thing I'm big on nature of what I've done the past few years is in-person events. Like I'm massive about in-person events, especially as the world becomes more digital when you've got AI and all these other fancy stuff. Like I think the in-person connection is really powerful. So that's why, we very rarely do online events. We often try to do in-person ones. I know it's not always practical. But for example, what we do with our clients is that we actually do in-person events. So one of the real estate clients worked with Savills, we brought 100 young people into Savills to actually get into the room, speak to the hiring managers, speak to some of the staff there. And what that does is that allows that two-way conversation naturally and organically as well. But one thing along that, which I'm even more big on, is the upskilling piece. So one of the reasons why I started Gen Z Recruits was that I found that through my experience of working with all these young people and through the corporations, the disconnect wasn't necessarily the hunger in my specific community because everyone's there because they're hungry to learn more. It was more around the skills that they didn't, no one was teaching them. So with university, it can be is a little bit outdated, and you might not always get the skills that the companies are actually looking for, especially in this new day and age, etc. So that's what the disconnect was. It wasn't a hunger; it was the fact that the young people are applying for roles not knowing what the company is actually looking for. So they might have all the talent and exactly what the company is looking for because no one's taught them what to actually put in your CV. The fact that this is an aviation company, maybe put some things that relate to aviation in your CV. Even though you might have it, you might just not know that. So I think a big factor is the upskilling piece. So I think creating those networking environments for those two conversations naturally, but also I'm really big on upskilling talent before they apply. And I think that for me, that's the most sustainable way to get, high quality application is that upskilling them. So one of the partners we worked with that were recruiting for tech roles, specifically in game tech, before they applied, we done a webinar which basically gave insight into the company that they're applying to, which also built trust for the company. We also made it very clear to the applicants what they're looking for. That's not giving them the answers or what to say. It's more like, this is what we're looking for. Here's what to think when you're applying. Because what that does mean is that the people that were actually eligible or able or fit to be in the role, they know what to put. Whereas a lot of companies miss out on talent simply because the person might have the requirements they're looking for, but they just don't, it's not clear to them what the company wants to see. So we do these webinars, we do these upskilling sessions to make it really clear to the applicant, here's what we're looking for, here's things to think about, here's things to show when you actually are applying. I think that's really important.
No, that's really helpful, Austin. Last kind of question to wrap this up. I mean, I think you probably got a lot of thoughts, you guys that are watching, and questions to ask. Could you just kind of crystallize what you would do if you were hired by an aviation organization to try and change this, both short term and long term? You've kind of mentioned it, but just for the audience, just to like get it clear in their minds, what do you think you would do?
Yeah, so I think you got to start from the bottom. So you got to understand what is it you're actually looking for. That's the main thing. So what skills you're looking for, what traits you're looking for, what is essential, like what essential things that you want this person to need, what is a bit less essential, and what could be taught. I think that's the first thing you're looking for. I think from then, I see recruitment marketing is very similar to marketing of like, as you know, in a fashion brand. So you look at marketing, you've got the top of funnel, mid funnel, and it's kind of like a funnel like this. I think the first thing with aviation is because it's maybe so traditional, is the brand awareness. So you might have a lot of people that might want to work in aviation, but they just might never have heard of a career in aviation. So that's when you want to do the brand awareness piece. We want to tap into communities and through social media and content and meet and reach large demographics of people just to talk about their sector. Because that way you'll pick up people that might not even be aware of it, that would be fit for it. So I think the first thing is brand awareness. Then when you've got that brand awareness, then you then want to look at what skills the top of funnel people have and what you're looking for and what can be taught. So I think the main thing I would look to do is tap into communities of people that are already in aviation, the people that are joining online forums around aviation or influencers that talk about aviation online, all that kind of stuff. Tap to those people first and foremost because those are going to be the people that are going to be passionate about aviation. That's where I would start. I wouldn't start and look for people that don't have an interest in aviation or don't have interest. I'll look for people that are already doing some sort of aviation-ish stuff. It doesn't have to be, the role is in of itself, but just showing that hunger and passion for it. And then I'll just look to think about what out of those people have got the skills we already need and what can be taught. and then I'll kind of move them along the funnel and upskill them along the way and kind of nurture those people along the way, if that makes sense. So I think the first thing I'll do is find the passionate people, because once you find that passion and the hunger, the rest of it you can teach. So I'd find those communities first and foremost, and I'll understand what I'm looking for. Then I'll think about how I can get them from the passionate people and the opportunity and how I can nurture them across, which could look like upskilling them, could look like insight days, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's a lot more detail, but it's hard to kind of put it into a
Yeah, no,
short.
that was good.
That's kind of what I'll, that's kind of where I'll look at. It's kind of like that funnel. I think what I want to get across is the funnel. So the passion is the first thing for the sector and the awareness, and then move them along that funnel to actually get them into the role.
Thank you, Austin. I appreciate it. We're going to come back to you later on with the wider panel. But yeah, for now, thank you for giving us your insights.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure you guys got some value from that, and if you want to post in your questions on to the Q&A on Teams, feel free to do that now. We will pick those up later on in the webinar. But for now, we're actually going to transition to our second keynote speaker, and we are going to give it to Bejay Mulenga, who is someone who I could and probably speak for 10 minutes on the amount of things that he's been doing. He's been a serial entrepreneur since 14, and he was offered a MBE in 2023, which for those of you who don't know is a high honor in England given by the King for his services to entrepreneurship and also tackling food poverty. But most importantly, he's to this webinar at least, most importantly is he is an early practitioner of Gen Z marketing, going into companies and helping them with marketing to Gen Z and attracting Gen Z. And so he's going to give a bit more about his story and how to change as an organization. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Bejay.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me today. I am very excited to kind of walk you guys through my story and give you guys a couple of ways that I've been working with companies to help them become a bit more magnetic to audiences that may not be as attuned to them. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I suppose I'm not controlling my slides today, so there might be a little bit of delay between me and the tech team. But a great place to start is probably with one's story and one's brand. So as Nathan said, I started as a teenager, and as a kid who was born in 1995, the changing guard between millennials and Gen Z, people aged 94, 95, 96, we all kind of like felt it. We're at the cost between where we, on one hand, knew what life was like when there was dial-up. Not so much having a brick phone, but definitely dial-up internet. But we also very much early adopters of all of the social media platforms, from Snapchat to TikTok to Instagram to your Facebooks and to your MySpaces. So myself being a 14-year-old wanting to be entrepreneurial, I always wanted to work in finance at the time, but you had to be 18 plus to kind of get a job. So I created my own tuck shop, and I'll give you guys a little bit around how I've managed to work with businesses in the food industry during my Super Tuck days. I'll then talk to you guys a little bit about Super Academy and Super Network and what we've done over there. But essentially, my career has been a myriad of me kind of growing and developing products based on where I have been at my different age rates. So 14 to 18, it was very much me as a teenager helping other teenagers become entrepreneurial. And then going into 18 to 23, I spent a lot of time helping people get into their first bits of jobs, very similar to Austin. And then at Super Network, we spent a lot of time privately consulting and advising really, really big companies, which has been really nice. Next slide, Jacob. So Gen Z, it's a term, it's a phrase. We've all heard it. We've all kind of come across it potentially. There's even Gen Alpha now. As Austin and Nathan quite rightly put it, the F and the age now they're saying is 97. For me, about 12 years ago, I started to get signposted and put on campaigns by Lucozade, by Google, and by a few other companies as a shining Gen Z that companies could come and talk to. My story is one of a lot of color, a lot of movement, a lot of dance, and I feel like we, alongside millennials, but definitely Gen Z, have been one of the first generations where it's quite hard to put us all in a box. we haven't all fitted into the natural movement of actually going from one job to another job to another job. And the story I'm about to show you guys is probably going to be very similar to or very different to a lot of Gen Zs that you guys will meet. There will be similarities, but there will be differences. And I think the first thing to kind of understand, if you're a hiring manager and you're a bit stressed out with trying to understand Gen Z, is the best way to kind of understand them is to just understand their story, because you're going to find passion and you're going to find points which are super relevant for them. If we can just move to the next slide, Jacob. So Super Tuck. I wanted to kind of talk about three main industries in this conversation that I think my story kind of speaks to, that you might find interesting. And then I wanted to kind of give you guys a couple of notes and thoughts that I'm thinking about a lot in my conversations with corporates. So when I was briefed to think about today's conversation, knowing that there was going to be the lovely Q&A we just had, and knowing my story, I felt like one of the most practical things to say when dealing with this generation is reverse mentoring, and it is spending time being very practical. So with Super Tuck, we created a tuck shop franchise where we basically create a corner shop in the school playground. And I was able to bring retailers, I was able to bring people who worked in senior management and retail into schools and actually set up a simulation shop for young people to engage in. Over the 5 years that kind of went past this time period, we managed to get young people to go get jobs at River Island, Selfridges, and also into FMCG brands like Pepsi. The context with this is, if you give young people the tools to actually have their own shop, to understand cash flow, to understand inventory management, when it comes down to them applying for their job, they're able to actually understand the logistics and the different department names. And it also enables employers to kind of go in and have a different type of engagement with a young person at secondary school, college, or even early years of uni, rather than it being a talk. The fact that we made an immersive workshop, it actually helped a lot of young people get into roles. So with that story, I think first takeaway that I wanted to double down on, which was said in the last talk, was the power of in-person, the power of creating reverse mentoring opportunities where you're not speaking down to an audience, but you're actually collaborating with them. And the format of building a workshop, especially a workshop that simulates what they might do in a retail environment, will enable people who are interested in those spaces to actually A, pique their interests, but B, those that hadn't considered it, pick it up. So for the aviation industry, I challenge you guys to think about, what could you do in a school setting? It doesn't have to be a classroom. What can you do in a dining hall? What can you do in a lunch area if you're dealing with much more younger kids? But if you are coming up a bit higher, and now we're looking at people who are 23, 24, as Austin said, they go all up to 27. What can we be doing in our work environment after work or in the weekends that might just attract people who are interested? And we'll talk a little bit more about other ideas with social in a minute. But being in a community, being intentional with how we engage with people, and making sure that it's not just a speaking down to people approach, is something that I think everyone needs to understand, especially if we're trying to attract people who come from diverse communities to your industry. Right, next case study to kind of bring up is I created the UK's first pop-up market run by teenagers. So 10 years ago this summer, we partnered with EE, Pepsi Max, Facebook, Barclays, and River Island, and we set up a varied scheme of pop-up shops, supermarkets, and ultimately culminating with us hiring a 50,000 square foot warehouse and having 500 young people go through rigorous training over a period of 3 months. And then they were able to have keys to their own warehouse to turn into a department store for a weekend. And there was a big live stream. And throughout that time, we basically put on a series of talks with really massive people across banking, music, art, and retail. This is an example of something where, if you do have the power in your team, sponsorship is something that I think is very important. Through this initiative, we have been able to help another 10,000 people get into work. We've got people here in this network who have ended up at music labels, people who ended up at River Island, people who ended up in digital teams. And it was done on purpose to kind of actually have a massive event that brought different types of teams together. The aviation industry is obviously connected to so many other industries. You know, you've got cybersecurity, you've got, you know, bag drop and check-in, you've got um, the food industry, you know. There are quite a few things that you could do, even tapping into people who obviously travel for festivals. Um, Sometimes it might not look one track to get yourself in. The other example was very much how do we simulate retail in a school or classroom environment. With this one, my big thinking is actually what are cultural moments happening that your industry could be associated with, especially when you're looking at tourism boards and all the other examples I gave. And how can we actually, with Gen Zs, people in their 20s or people in their late teens, engage them on a weekend? Like this photo I'm showing you was taken on a Sunday afternoon. You know, these people came out because they wanted to be there. People tend to obviously step up. And then the other bit I mentioned the length of program. So nurturing, super important. Um, what can we do? What resources do we have in a team that actually could actually be deployed as part of the campaign? There are various organizations out there who are proactively doing half the work for you already. They're attracting people that want to be pilots. They're attracting people who want to go in and do stuff abroad. And it might just be an opportunity for the industry to actually signpost and get involved in a different way. So I wanted to bring that to you guys' attention. And then another case study, and all this work that I did ended up bringing me into Downing Street and into the Royal Family to do some consultancy. And I think the point here is what leverage do we have from a credibility perspective? What big boards are we involved in? What charters are we involved in as a team, as a business that actually could have influence on a national level? I think one thing that my work led me to do was to consult government on how enterprise education was viewed in the country. But I've now gone back and engaged with government around the future of the Commonwealth and entrepreneurship, and more recently tackling loneliness. I think there's something about the jobs up north right now, the leveling up program. There's a lot of talk around the future of benefits. I think aviation can actually have a massive, especially if there are gaps in industries where you guys are trying to attract people. I think we can actually take a step as leaders in our business and actually join the government in national schemes, national campaigns, which could actually reduce the financial investment in doing the bigger projects I speak of, but B, also give you guys leverage and access to a lot more early talent or more rough talent that you could actually sharpen and make diamonds for your organization. So at different points in my career, I have found things that have been interesting and aligned it with government in party. So entrepreneurship was a big agenda. I'm the Conservative 10 years ago. The last 4 or 5 years, it's been a lot about loneliness and community. And right now, growth and the economy is all about growing. So I think this is a prime opportunity for the aviation industry to actually find some time to kind of connect with people. And I would look and implore everyone to think about what you could be doing up north. So to wrap up, as I've hogged the mic a little bit there, and I wanted to jump at quite a lot of value for everyone. I think being in the community was something that I really resonate with, and I thought about before the session, and it was really good to hear in the previous talk to mine. Thinking about how you can design IRL experiences. Austin gave quite a lot of different examples. I've given quite a few examples. It doesn't have to be all on you guys's shoulders. You can actually collaborate with smaller organizations who are already doing things, who are already engaging the future youth in. So being in the community is super important. The power of story. I didn't double down on this earlier, but I wanted to kind of give you guys a bit more from me now. And basically, every young person that you guys will meet will have people that they will relate to or that they understand. I think we've all probably heard the classic analogy, you know, people want to be footballers, rappers, or pop stars growing up. Now, I think entrepreneurship has become super cool. So there's a lot more people that want to be entrepreneurs, but there is definitely an opportunity still around the angle, around stability, around growth, and also around industries that have been evolved that people can actually grow and actually change their life. And I think looking within your teams and finding stories is something that's super important that I would recommend everyone do. There isn't enough time in this keynote for me today to give case studies of other people's work, but I'm really proud of the work and that the social teams are doing with Duolingo, with the Curry's team on TikTok, employee engagement. We've all heard of maybe UGC, user generated content, but employee generated content is really on the rise right now. And I think that will be a very, very key thing for your teams to be thinking about as you're thinking about hiring Gen Z, making content and that on apps that they're already in. Outside of the IRL stuff and the event stuff, but just on a very practical level on social, who can we empower that already works within our business to actually have storylines on our socials? It doesn't have to be super polished. You can do some trends and it doesn't have to be top down, but that is a very massive opportunity that is not going away and it's only going to grow a lot more this year. On the smart sponsorship side of stuff, if you guys don't already have a massive influx of people pitching you guys to sponsor so that you could take half the battle, I do think you guys could be utilizing LinkedIn and your Instagrams a little bit more effectively to enable a bit of a tendering process for organizations like myself and Austin to pitch and send ideas. As I'm pretty sure Austin will agree with me. There's plenty of ideas, and I'm sure Nathan also will agree with me here as well. There's loads of people doing interesting things, and smart sponsorship is going to be a really, really key way for you guys to engage with people, especially if you don't want to align with government. And then the last point I'd make is it's okay to get it wrong. I think my generation are the first generation who've seen a lot of change. Council culture has been up and down, and no one expects people to get it right. We just expect you to be proactive and communicate with us often. So I would definitely double down and ask that if you are in a position to influence a campaign to try to attract Gen Zs to your organization, rather than going polished, go with consistency. And I'll leave it just there.
Thank you, BJ. Appreciate it. That was really insightful. And as I said before, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A in Teams, and we will shortly be able to answer those in the joint panel. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Ben, who's going to introduce the panel to us.
Fantastic. I mean, thank you so much, Austin and BJ. I hope everyone agrees listening into that. Some real nuggets there that we can kind of build on a little bit. I was fascinated by the idea of Austin's idea of the gap that exists between what a corporate might think is needed and what is actually wanted, and at the different stages as well. I happened to be talking to someone from Women in Aviation Singapore this morning, and she was saying they create touch points to try and close that gap, touch points right through someone's progression. So yeah, really looking forward to your questions. There's already some coming in, which is great. Love to introduce this expert panel that we've got now. This is people from aviation who've worked around, who have been thinking about some of these issues and actually seen what's worked, what hasn't worked, and we'll be talking about some of these issues. So with me, we've got Andrea Sack. Andrea is currently the Director of Safety, Security and Quality at Austro Control. But I think she's actually been playing a game of bingo over the last few years, because she's actually worked in airlines, in maintenance, in airports, in general aviation, in search and rescue. It's basically like a full house in terms of where she's been. So lots of different perspectives. Really look forward to hearing from you in a second, Andrea, but thank you for joining us. She's deeply invested in this issue of aviation talent, how we find a way of shaping culture, how we find a way of shaping our organizations to secure the safe skies in the future, to secure what we all want to do. So, yeah, thank you. Really good for you to be with us. Also with us, we're honored to have Ismail Polat. Ismail is Senior Vice President of Development at Dubai Airports and has an enormous task on his hand, as we have both Dubai International Airport and, for those that know the region, Al Maktoum, moving into operations in the years ahead. Now you can imagine, as you move an entire airport into operations, one of the key challenges is the workforce. Ismail has some experience of this because he's a sucker for punishment. He's doing it for a second time in some ways because he's done Istanbul before, and worked across IGA in terms of taking what was at the time, may still be, the largest PPP greenfield airport through to operation. In Dubai, he manages research, design, program, PMO teams, and he's looking at the design and development of Al Maktoum. So really grateful for you both joining. Thank you for your time, and yeah, we'll press on with the panel itself. I think we're going to hear from you guys to start with, and then we'll bring in Bejay and Dostin a little bit later, if that's okay. Maybe first question then for Andrea. It's we've sat in various meetings. It's been an acknowledged problem for a while that we struggle to recruit. I guess let's focus maybe on the engineers and the air traffic controllers. So the more vocational, the more licensed professions. What's some of the structural issues you've seen behind this?
Thanks, Ben, and also thanks to Austro and Bejay for setting the scene. So I think that it's not only a challenge, it's probably also one of our biggest future business risks, not finding enough young talent to work in our organizations. I guess there's a bunch of structural challenges. It begins with the fact that to yield 30 air traffic controllers, we usually need about 1,000 applicants. Because the skill set we're looking for is so specific. So that means that we need really good recruiting processes. And of course, we don't have the luxury, so to say, to just recruit the people who have a passion for aviation. We really need to recruit a broad number of people from different backgrounds and I guess sort of nurture their passion when they're in our organizations. And I do think that ANSPs have been doing a lot in terms of recruiting in the last years. So from my network at CANSO, I know that a lot of ANSPs are really turning to, social media, visiting schools, going to job fairs, and just marketing the jobs in a much more captivating way. And that's a really good thing. And I think that's probably something where we should also learn from one another a little bit more. I know that some ANSPs are really good at it. Others are still in their, starting point of doing that. But that's good. So I think a lot's happened there. And that's really important. That's the most important enabler. But the thing is, when we then do find these good people, the younger generation, we've noticed, especially women, interestingly enough, aren't that enthusiastic always about working shifts. And also many aren't necessarily looking for a career where they're going to be doing the same thing for years to come. Now, being an air traffic controller is super complex work, and every day is like a new challenge. So it's really a fascinating job on one hand, but nonetheless, I think many want a career path, which gives them sort of future perspectives where they sort of know what's coming, 10 years down the road. And I do understand it to a certain extent as well. So we're recruiting super smart, super talented young people, really the best of the best. And they're at the beginning of their careers, and they want to have enrichment. They want to, have perspectives. And I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that's one of the challenges, that we can't often offer that the way we'd like to. With engineers, I think it's a slightly different situation and probably also completely different challenges. So we're looking for engineers to work on systems that aren't always the most innovative, partly even on legacy systems, as we all know. The market for engineers is super competitive. We all know that. Yeah? And the thing is, we're not competing against other ANSPs when we're looking for engineers. We're competing against really innovative companies. We're competing against, engineering companies, tech companies, and that's really difficult for us, of course, to offer the same sort of technological options as they do. And I think a third point is that I've had a lot of discussions with this about young people recently. I also lecture at a university, and a lot of young people consider aviation to be a dirty industry. And I think that perhaps I have to say at this stage, we are doing a lot in aviation to really, improve our sustainability. And I think that we're a lot better than other industries. It seems we're not really doing the messaging as good as we could be. But I think that's also a part, the reputation of the aviation industry, perhaps from a almost ethical standpoint, not being that attractive to young people anymore as it once was. So I think that they're probably the biggest challenges we have.
No, really good. Thank you. I've got three kids in school, and it's noticeable the messaging into school that says move away from that kind of dirty viewpoints. And if as an industry we're associated with that, clearly at a formative age, so as Austin and BJ were saying, when
Absolutely.
people are thinking about that passion, thinking about role models and so on, we really get a disconnect if we're not careful.
Exactly.
Really
Exactly.
good.
Exactly.
Ismail, for you've got a very different environment because the airport obviously has quite the variety of roles. It's basically a small city. And then in the case of Dubai, it's a big city. Where do you see airports struggling to attract talent from your experience?
Well, Ben, thank you very much. It's great to be part of this great discussion. And Andreas was actually quite right to the point. We still have the same struggles for airports also. I guess in general, when I look at the time frame that when I started working at airports, it's not we don't have the same appeal anymore, like, apparently. It's not that exciting job for the young generation, I guess. Back when I started 25 years ago, have a chance to work with an airport or airport project was like the top of the top of the top. So you were really looking forward to that, and you will chase that wherever you can find that opportunity. But today it's the opposite. So we have our biggest issue on airports that we have never been in this kind of situation. So we always had talent. So we were just trying to pick the best of the best of the best. Now we have to be more proactive. We have to chase that talent and introduce to aviation to airports. I think that's been one of our challenges. This is kind of an environment that we're not familiar with, if I may say, not like the other industries, where they are very experienced in that. And I've seen that in on the developing process of the Istanbul airport. Here we are seeing that as one of the biggest challenges when we're developing the Al Maktoum International Airport for the future phases. Getting the right talent is going to be the biggest problem for us. And we're working for that. The entire aviation and airport industry is working for that. We're trying to, as mentioned before, also with Austin and BJ, we're trying to get the brands out, inform about aviation, and we try to reach the universities, the schools, even the younger generations. But it's a work in progress. It's not there yet very successfully, but new ideas are coming in. The hopeful thing is that when we introduce this and then we get the new generation into our workforce, we see how passionate they become once they introduce to the job environment. We see that they want to stay longer, and they want to build careers around here, and they want to invest in their development. They expect the airports and the aviation industry to help them to develop that so they can actually really contribute that. As Andrea mentioned, yeah, the aviation kind of seemed like a dirty environment, but once they come into it, they see the opportunity that they can really make change. So they want to be part of that now. But to get them inside is the key, hopefully. Once we get that, make that attraction, get them inside, and explain ourselves better. I think our retentions is better in that sense. And hopefully it will match the expected growth of the aviation for the next decades.
That's a challenge, isn't it? Absolutely. Andrea, you picked up some of the structural issues. I mean, what have you seen around what's working as well? So the current strategies maybe aren't quite as successful. You've got a difficult task, as you said, 1,000 or so applicants to filtering into the 30. But what isn't working and what could work, I guess?
Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing is that we really need a shift in work culture and also in branding as ANSPs, but also perhaps in the aviation industry in general. Because we're realizing more and more that this next generation just has different workplace expectations than the previous generations. And we've noticed very strongly that they value things like purpose, flexibility as well. Of course, technology and also diversity is also something that's becoming more and more important. So what does that mean? So I mentioned that I think that many aren't looking for a company which they're going to stay doing the same thing until they retire. So I think on one hand, it would be super important to really offer career opportunities within their career as an air traffic controller. For example, we could train them more to take on roles in the organization, different roles. We're partly doing that. So, for example, I have a lot of air traffic controllers who are taking on active safety roles in addition to their job as an air traffic controller. The problem is we don't really like doing that because they're rare and because they're expensive, and you don't take your rarest, most expensive resource and train it to do something that someone else could probably be doing. But I think that at the same time, we have to also embrace the fact that they bring in special talent and they bring a different mindset to the table. And if we want to retain people, that we're going to have to start doing that a little more. I think the second most important thing is that, so I said purpose, and I think money isn't really the key anymore to retaining people. I think that more and more I have a lot of these conversations that they want to be part of something meaningful. That they want to understand the why. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, who's always saying you have to understand your why as an organization. I think that indeed is super true. They need to know what they're contributing to the organization, to have a voice and really be part of what's happening in the organization and not just part of the operational process. And I do think that ANSPs, from a value perspective, have a very strong purpose. But I think that we're probably not doing such a good job at communicating it. And we need to get Generation Z more engaged in discussions around that. As Austin said, to sort of relieve the disconnect between Gen Z and our organizations. I think that's super important. And so for me, of course, as a safety director, but just as an ANSP person, I always say our core value as ANSPs is safety. And that means bringing people home safely to their families at the end of the day, to their vacations, connecting people. And air traffic controllers who work at the front line and also engineers have a huge part in this, and they should be, more part of the conversation on how we, achieve the safety as well. And I think that we really need to communicate that value in a different way and rebrand ourselves in a different way. And also sustainability. We need to get people in our organization, the younger generation, really involved in the sustainability discussions. We need to get their ideas on board. And I think when it comes to sustainability, so as an industry, yes, we're doing a lot, but also as individual organizations, it's not always about the big things. It's not always about continuous descent approach and free route airspace. It's also about the smaller things, It's also about, having organic food at your canteen or giving people free passes to travel with the bus or, recycling, all of those sorts of things. And that may seem really unimportant from an organizational perspective, but for the people in the organization, it's part of being a community. It's your community. You take care of each other and you take care of your environment. And I think that that's also something that we could work on a little bit more than we have been in the past. So they're just some examples.
Really good. Love it. We talk in Firstfruits sometimes about culture being far wider than a simple set of behaviors or something like that. It's the personality of an organization.
Absolutely.
And, we sometimes disconnect, I guess, in aviation. In that even if we present something, when people come in, there's a different reality. So, yeah, completely agree. I was thinking as you were talking about your second point there, and focusing on the impact as much as on the core task. I've been involved with one of the world's largest humanitarian airlines over the last 5 years or so. A big change they've made, instead of talking about the flying, they're now talking about the impact. And it has increased engagement massively for them. Really interesting shift. So it's kind of, they're in aviation, but they're talking about the humanitarian side of it. Similar for you with safety.
Yeah, exactly.
Really good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really good.
Great conversations as well. Also for us, they're really eye-openers, partly the way they perceive the world and, the core values of the organization.
Yeah, it's what Austin was saying earlier, isn't it? It's that gap and how we close it as quickly as possible. Ismail, for you, I mean, with the airport environment, clearly it's multifaceted. But what are some of the things that you've seen in the approaches, what works and maybe what doesn't work?
Well, and what you said is also happening in aviation, in airports also. We are transitioning from a pure infrastructure to more service type of industry. Now the passenger experience, the staff experience is becoming more and more important. I mean, we talk about big numbers, right? For example, Dubai airports last year had 92 million passengers. Istanbul had 80 million passengers. We're talking about 500,000 air traffic movements in 1 year. very big numbers. Even if you take it down to an hour, we're talking about 15,000 people going through any process. But for that person, it's still a very individual experience, right? So we want to make sure that that experience is at the highest level. So it's a different shift than providing an infrastructure anymore. And the talent also needs to be in that same manner. So when we introduce that talent and attract the talent into our businesses, we need to explain that this is a service we're trying to provide, but it comes with all that necessary compliance, necessary safety elements, and technology, as well as the passenger and the staff experience along with it. A few interesting, I guess, initiatives that we tried and see that it works is um, um, first, here at Dubai Airports, we have a fantastic group on HR and the talent development team. They have been working on a what we call a graduate program where they are specifically targeting universities and the graduate students, introducing Dubai airports and inviting them to actually work here. Not like an internship anymore, but just be part of the working environment. It's not a 2 3 months process. We're talking about a year process where they can be part of uh, a few different departments and actually uh, breathe the air here, right? In aviation, we said that once you smell jet fuel, you can't get rid of that. It's the same. We're trying to get them to that, and so that we try to expose them to whether the planning of the airport operations, actual operations itself, or safety, the security, compliance, airside operations, different elements, and they can see uh, the challenges there. They can see the technology, how it's used, how their talents are contributing with actual results. And what we've seen that retention rate from those programs, the graduate program, is quite high. Uh, that's very good. But more importantly, when we look at their performance, is actually above the average when we look at the graduate programs joining to us. Uh, and after that period, also they become quite selective on which department and what role they want to work on, and have a more better idea about their career path. We did similar program also we had back in Istanbul when we want to develop the talent. We had our HR department there, the fantastic team that they developed an MT program similar to what you see in financial institutions. So they actually called out for the best of the best graduates, and there was a big selection process. If I remember, we had about 1,000 applicants and then brought it down to 20, and they were interviewed by all C levels. They were given tasks to understand airport operations. Then about 8 month program, they went every department and they did perform certain tasks at each department. And after that program, the completion of 8 months, they again, uh, by mutual understanding of each department and their request, they were placed in different departments. A very successful result, I believe, as far as I remember, every single MT program started, they finished it successfully, and they retained positions at Istanbul Airport, and they continue working that, and they will continue developing that. And even we try to go uh, beyond the university degrees. In Istanbul, together with the Ministry of Education, we have helped them to develop a high school. The focus of the high school is aviation industry, whether it's airline side of it, like the ground handling or mechanics technicians, or avionics. And I believe they also try to introduce now the airport management into their program. So even at the high school level, kids kind of exposed to the aviation environment, and they continue internships during the summer or holidays at the airport environment. Hopefully we can retain some of that talent and we can create that passion with the new generation. Those are a few, I think, new elements that we've seen really working fine. But we have to extend that because the growth of aviation is strong, and the talent, once they get inside, aviation itself requires a high level of competency and technical expertise. So they need to get trained. I'm sure Andrea knows it very well. You cannot put a controller in the first day in front of the position. It has to go through a lot of trainings, on the job trainings, to understand the impact of what they're doing. Same on airports. You can drive a car and you can be a follow me leading an aircraft, but you need to understand you have like 300 people, a few hundred million aircraft that is following you. So your driving skills now need to be beyond that. So we need to make that we can build that competence, and through training and continuous training. Once we see the passion, I think everything comes together there.
Love it. Love it. We're going to bring the others in as well. I think Austin and Bejay are coming in to join us. Hopefully we'll get everyone in. Fantastic. I love the idea of so you don't set up a Gen Z club, or you don't have a corporate go in. You set up an entire school. And then you go, right, okay, we're going to get everyone in this way. Is that kind of from age 11 onwards?
Yep.
Wow.
Age 11 onwards, going to high school, and then from there they can go. Actually, they get a technician certificate. They can really start working directly, or they can pursue, university level degrees and then continue if they choose so.
Wow, love it. I mean, Austin, I'll come to you first. We've been looking at the Q&A that are coming in. Please keep your questions coming. There's some really good ones in here. We talk about communities of people, and obviously you were able to bring that together through the club. But do you think the companies need to work together on that? Should they be more specific and do it on their own to tell the story well? What's been your experience as to how to do it, or did they just set up a school?
Yes, so a lot of what I see, because especially with me, I work with a lot of real estate partners who are actually competitors. So a lot of them are like, oh, do you want to work with X? But what I see is that my answer is yes, and here's the reason. So, Andrea spoke about how you got about 30 roles, 20 roles. So there's actually more people than there are roles available. So if you can create an industry where there's more availability for everyone, you get more people interested in aviation, for example, everyone wins. Whereas if you try to like keep it really small, you're actually suppressing the market. So I think by coming together, what you are doing is creating a larger market for everyone to really win. And I do believe everybody can win. And I also want to quickly brush up on what Andrea said earlier regarding the passion. So really, really quickly. So I'm not ignorant to the fact that passion will get you a job. Like, I don't think that in itself meet your job. But what I do believe is that will allow you to go through the training. So I see a lot of parallel. I love looking at parallels. So we look at, I'm a football fan. I love football. If you look at an academy, right? So Chelsea, they got their academy under sixes, right? Under 12s, or sorry, under into the first team. And if you look at most footballers, most of them are passionate about football. But being passionate enough isn't going to get you a job as a footballer. You've got to be able to use your feet and control the ball. However, passion is the starting point through it. So the point I'm trying to make here is the fact that with aviation, air traffic control, I know there's a lot of really niche specific skills, but I think it starts with the passion, then you can teach them. And a good example of how that can be in good use is similar to what football do with academies, but also boot camps. So one of our clients are a boot camp provider, and there's a massive issue right now with technology and AI and skills gaps. So what they do is a really intensive 12-week boot camp to give them all the skills so that they're now ready to work and get a job in that sector. And companies can look at that. However, without the passion, you cannot do that boot camp. Like, it's 9 to 5, unpaid, 12 weeks. But the passion is what allows them to actually apply for the bootcamp in the first place and get through it. So I don't believe passion alone is what's going to get you the job. However, passion is the starting point to get you through the academy, through the bootcamp, through the skills to actually land you the job eventually.
I love that, Austin. I really like the idea of that boot camp as well. That's fantastic.
Very good. You mentioned there about, it's better to bring people together because actually, as you say, you're filtering down for one organization, but actually by looking across, it's really good. I think you've also got the issue of economies of scale, probably. So it costs to do some of this stuff. And whilst major organizations, and I'll point you at Ismail with the Dubai airports, I'm sure there's a relatively decent budget there. For some on this call or some listening to the recording, you've got small organizations and it's 4 or 5 people working out what they do next. And by coming together with others, clearly there's got to be ways to find better benefit. I'm sure you've seen the same.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Super. One of the questions that came in, and maybe it's to anyone on the panel, there's a perceived lack of the pathways into internships. So you might get someone at school who's kind of interested in certain areas here, but are there the ways to connect into some of our companies in a way that helps them see what's actually going on, or are they forced to wait and then just get the job, or move into a competitive marketplace. What do we think is what's happening there in terms of are we actually creating or not? I mean, what have you guys seen outside the industry, but also what have you guys seen inside aviation?
I can start with this one. So I think it's two things. So it's branding and it's marketing. So I think it's one of the amazing point earlier where it's like when you just rebranded the proposition a little bit and made it all about impact, you got way more applications. And I think that a big thing is the way that comes up branding themselves is suppressing them. So they might just put which I hate, like a flyer on the LinkedIn page and come and work here, but that doesn't do anything. But the companies that see more success are the ones that can rebrand what it actually is like to be an air traffic controller, for example, or work in the industry. And I think that's really important. So I think the first thing is how are you branding it? It's like, I'm a massive marketing fan. If you look at Apple, for example, they don't talk about the nuts and bolts of the products. That's what Steve Jobs said. He says that he doesn't market Apple's, high technical stuff. They market the feeling, the emotion. So I think that as companies, we need to market more. What is it like to work in these sectors? What is the impact that I can create? The emotion. That's what's going to make people actually want to work and stay there. I think the second thing is the marketing and the networks. So and I think this is a good thing as well because you have to understand that you don't have to do it all alone. You can rely on other communities, other people, other companies, other businesses. So even with us, when we hire talent, we don't just use our community. I might tap into a game influence or game tech community, or I might tap into a university department that has gaming specific. So I think we need to understand that it's not all on us. You can't just post a LinkedIn post to the same network of people who are going to see the same thing every time. I see a lot of companies and hiring managers post the same LinkedIn post who's going to be seen by your connections, no one else. So you might feel no one's applying, but it's like no one's applying for you. But if you could just put the same offer into a new community or a new industry, you might see a lot more. So I think it's around tapping into people that have built that trust in their communities. And, especially as Gen Z, you want someone that can almost looks like you, relate to you. Like, if I told people my generation something, they might listen to me a little bit more than other people because I built that trust and they resonate with me. So I think it's also around stop trying to take on the world by yourself. How can you utilize people that have built trust in the communities that you're trying to reach?
Nice. Thank you. Andrea, Ismail, anything to say about that specific point? Or do we have the internships or the ways into companies?
If I may, maybe a few words about that. I mean, look at the internship in two different levels. One is that there's an internship when you have a certain degree and you go for an internship to get experience, and there's an internship before you get the degree. And now, when you have a degree, it's rather easy because now you have a certain set of skills. And unfortunately, aviation has a lot of high risk job profiles where the liability becomes a critical element. Uh, but it doesn't mean that internship cannot be introduced. Uh, Turkey, for example, in Turkey, there was a big internship program started by the government, and Istanbul Airport finished number one by hiring, if I'm not mistaken, over 1,000 internships across the board of the airport community. But we brought them an example like you may be studying engineering, but your internship will be in airport operations, not necessarily directly engineering related element. However, we had other internships when we had the graduates, similar to an on-the-job training type of thing, where they can actually work on their internship. So it's a two-way element that airports, us, we need to do a little bit better job on setting up the right internships in our organization charts and place that different roles of responsibility, if you will, and then go for that. Explain that outside and bring the internships in. We have similar at Dubai airports also try to bring the internships as early as possible. Right now started with the graduate programs that goes for a year, but hopefully we'll go below that. But on one side subject, you mentioned getting the community together, which was a very good question. Another initiative is that in aviation, we need to get together also closely. That doesn't necessarily happen at every part of it, especially um, when we're working on aviation, you can't get it. Airport itself is not alone. We're together with the airlines, with ground handlers, air navigation, ANSP, and navigation service providers. You're with the regulators. So there is a big community there, and so there's a big opportunity to know each other, that we can support each other better. Certain talents may not be suitable for you for an airport, but other parts of the community can benefit, or vice versa. And you see that in business itself, people moving from airline to airports or from airline to ANSP, that happens once you have a certain level of maturity and experience. But that doesn't mean that we can direct that kind of talent. One program we run is similar for that purpose was secondary programs. So we went, for example, in Istanbul, went to international organizations like ICAO, Eurocontrol, and told them that we're going to fund this resource and talent. So they'll be there to understand your organization so we can create that synergy better. So we can actually guide people to your direction if need to be.
Superb.
And we expect the same also, but maybe now you can learn about us better, that you can guide certain talent to our direction also. This is I think this kind of initiatives, when it's become more an industry,
you change the market, don't you? You change who's actually talking about
absolutely. We'll see the benefits better and better, I think.
No, I love it. Nathan, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, I wanted to ask one question which I saw in the Teams chat, and we've touched on. It's this back to this idea of passion. It's actually something that we're looking at with CANSO in our initiative Future Skies Tomorrow's Voices, and it's something that we saw come up quite a lot in the data was the people currently in the industry in Gen Z are in it because they're passionate, and we're trying to understand why they're passionate. And in a sense, that's great, but it might not be enough to only rely on getting people in the industry that are passionate. And so my question to both BJ and Austin is, you guys have worked with corporations that are more traditional. Austin, you talked about banking, real estate. I imagine that not everyone grows up with a deep desire to work in real estate or banking, and that they don't only recruit people that are passionate. And so my question to you is, how would you go about targeting and attracting people that are not necessarily passionate about aviation going into it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
BJ, do you want to start?
Yeah, go on. Look, I think there's a few things when it comes down to attracting people who may not already know. The biggest thing is storytelling, as we both hopped on about at the start of the panel. People need to know that there's amazing opportunities within your industry and what that job looks like. I think that employee-led content is something that can change the market for a lot of businesses in this industry. Obviously, the age-old question is salary, money. That was something that a lot of people wanted to know. If there is examples of people who have made something amazing, like I think Ismail's story about the work you guys are doing with the academy is an example of something that just gets people inspired. Like, can I do this in Norwich? Can I do this in Manchester? Can I do this in Singapore? Where else can we build these academies? So opportunities to grow and have a legacy in the industry, I think is something that a lot of people are looking at now. Because I don't think everyone just thinks they're going to get the flashy car and have £1 million business, but they are seeing some of their friends buy awesome places from doing really inspiring work. So some of the final like tech bros and tech girls have kind of like really inspired people, and I think that's now coming across in your other industry. So if there's opportunities like that in this industry, that'd be a big one. And then the final thing I'd say is obviously hybrid working, coming back to work is a play, but people want to see the world, and aviation allows you to see the world. So is there opportunities for job placements? Is there opportunities for people to kind of work in another country for a little bit? I mean, the opportunity for me to work in Turkey for 6 months this year sounds very exciting, and followed up by Dubai. So yeah, some of that detail that might just be normal to you guys, but what are the progression routes looking like for people 1-2 years down the line in different departments? Obviously, you guys will know better than us.
Yeah, 100%. I think just follow up on that is the first thing around the passion not being, enough to get a job. I really recommend leaning into the boot camp that I said earlier. Like, I'm gonna defend my generation a little bit here. Whose job is it to teach them these things? They're young. You don't just wake up knowing how to control an aircraft. Someone's got to teach them. So I think it's a bit naive and unfair to almost say you've got a passion, but you haven't got the skills. Okay, but who's going to teach them the skills? And I think that's really important. So I think, you can either look for the best talent or you can create the best talent. And I think that if you've got the passion, that's a good foundation to create the best talent, which is what I try and do with my agency. So I'd say lead into boot camps, find the passionate people, and think about how you can actually upskill them. Same with football in the academy. You don't get that 6-year-old and put him in the first team. You get that 6-year-old and you nurture him along to play in the first team. I think more organizations to think about doing that. Second thing around passion. So two things. I think the first of all is that it's okay to walk away from some people that aren't passionate. Like, you don't have to force them. Like, if it's just not for them, it's not for them. And I think that, one of my idols, a man called Gary Vee, he's really big on this. And he goes, how BJ mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship's become a lot more trendy. But he says that if you weren't, selling sweets in school, are you sure you want to be an entrepreneur? Because it's cool. And I think that the people that are passionate about aviation, before they even know what aviation was, they would just love airplanes. They would be like building planes with their Lego. Like the people that are passionate about aviation, they're already passionate about it. I don't think it's something you can turn on at 20 years old. They would already be doing something along the lines of aviation. I think find those people. I think the second thing is kind of what BJ said around storytelling and branding. So I think get the people, so get the Gen Zs in organizations, get them to tell their stories, because that's who young people can relate to. Get them to talk about how they went to Dubai to work on an aircraft for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, showcase that on TikTok, all that kind of stuff. So almost showcasing, one, people that look like them and make them do it, but also the emotional side of it, the benefits of it, the flexible working, the travel opportunities, the impact you're creating. And I think it's really important to get the people that resonate with that audience to speak about their experience of it and their benefits of it.
But I wonder whether that would help. There was one question around from someone who engages with a lot of schools, and I'm not sure whether this is APAC or not, Asia Pacific or not, but an overwhelming view being they're just not clever enough. Like people are saying, well, I don't see how I make that leap. I see that other things are more interesting maybe to me because I can see the pathway. I can see how I can get to that point, or I can see that I could do that. Clearly boot camp can do that, telling the story can do that, but maybe we need to tell the story not just with the success, so the captain or whatever who became a captain at age 24 and flies net jets now or something like that. Maybe we need to tell the more ordinary stories as well and show people those pathways more.
Yeah, for sure. And and even that idea of clever, like when you're young, how do you know how clever you really are? Maybe just my perspective, but I'll be honest, I don't think I was that clever. In school, I wasn't a straight A student. I got average A levels, average grades, but but I found my cleverness in other areas. And I think as I get older, so I think I'm very skeptical of young people saying I'm not clever because who's taught you that? Because you got a certain grade in the topic you're not passionate about. Of course, you're not gonna be clever in that, but it's about finding nurturing these people to redefine what cleverness actually is and make them understand it. Because you can be unclever in writing poems, but you might be an amazing person when it comes to air traffic control and marketing. So I think it's really important to look at that.
And can I just add something there? I think that in aviation, Ismail was saying that early, we have so many different jobs for all different kinds of skill sets as well. And I think that perhaps we should also work at making sort of our entry-level jobs more interesting. I began my first job in aviation was as a handling agent. I basically made my career path from there. I always took new opportunities, learned new things. And I think that examples like that, just start somewhere and figure out what you're interested in and you'll find your path, I think, at the end of the day, if you're really motivated to learn and to grow.
Exactly.
Really good. Really good. I'm aware of time. I mean, it's flown by. In 30 seconds, try and keep it 30 seconds. If you had full control of an organization, you're Elon Musk-esque in SpaceX, what one thing would you do that you feel would make a difference to having the talent that you need by 2030 or 2035 or beyond? What one thing would you do? Go on, BJ, you're nodding. I'll start with you.
No, you know what? I'm quite interested in Ismail's point because I feel like you're gonna have Turkey, Dubai. I don't know where you're gonna go, but I think based on today's conversation and based on my life, I would be looking at a growing market and looking to kind of really take over a space that we feel like we can have an imprint. So if you're looking at tourism, if you're looking at places people are traveling, let's say looking at Kenya, you're looking at Zanzibar, a place where you can work with a local government and really do something. I would put a third of my resources there and do marketing different, do all that stuff that me Austin spoke about, and also maybe build an academy where people can learn. I think that idea is a model that lots of other companies should be looking at. If you can't afford to do your own one, it kind of really ties in well with what I was talking about working in government.
Mm.
And if I had to flip the idea and make it more British, because we're in Britain, I'm in Britain right now, I would go and compete with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and maybe build a new big airport and a whole complex of really interesting planes and museums and get people doing stuff. I think that would be quite interesting. I don't know. What
I
do you
love
think?
that. I love that. Chuck in a bunch of augmented reality and stuff like that and really get people to engage.
I agree. I think with me, like when I want to get to a goal, I want to be as in control as possible. And you mentioned earlier the touch points. I think that's so important. So with me, I want to be in control, and based on how difficult it actually is to be these, I think I saw a stat where air traffic control is one of the hardest jobs to work ever. So because of how skills based it is, obviously as you mentioned, passion is enough. So I want to control it. I will set up a boot camp and get people with a passion on it and almost hold their hands into the industry a little bit and give them the skills that they need. The people that already got the right foundations, give them the skills they need and set up a boot camp. And as Bejay mentioned earlier, some of the boot camps we work with, they're government funded. So, like if you can't afford to create the boot camp, how can you speak to the government and say, look, this is a massive issue right now. Aviation industry is a struggle. If this industry dies, it will affect the whole economy. We need some of your money so we can upskill some of the young people to get them to where they need to get to, or even not even just government investors, like if you can't afford it, have the conversation with people that have the money that can see the impact. And it is an issue. And I think governments, if they were aware of how big the issue is, they're going to want to put money towards it because they put money towards other things as well. So I'd say the boot camp is the one thing that I'm really big on based on how high the skill set is. And then if you can't afford it, tap into government funding.
Love it. Thank you. Andrea.
So I'd probably add that I would really like to have a real community in the organization where young talents have the opportunity to learn and grow, where the beginning of your career is exactly that, and you just have room to develop skills and work in different areas. That I think would be the most important thing for me.
Superb. Ismail.
Well, two things for the young generation. I would create youth camps at the aviation ecosystem, if you will, so they can be part of that. And the second one, I would like to, if I had the chance, and of course the budget also, to maybe set some KPIs for my team to go out there and mentor the young generation. Go out there, actively try to recruit, and it shouldn't be just an HR's burden try to find people, but let's take that responsibility a little bit and help them and mentor the young generation towards aviation and tell maybe the real story with not just the glory part of it, but it's just with the stress, with the hard parts of it. But hopefully at the end, all of them comes with its own reward of satisfaction and job success, I guess, where you can really make a difference because, like single engineer with the right safety case can change the entire aviation industry. And what you study can become a rule for the next generation of the entire industry. So it's not something that you can come up with any other industry easily. And I'll try to pass that torch that way.
Superb. A big thank you to all of you because there's been some absolute nuggets in there. Really good. I'm going to hand back to Nathan to wrap us up now because we're just about hitting the time. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
A big thank you to all our speakers for helping us dissect this issue. And as we have kind of touched on, it's very multifaceted. So there will be other chances for you to look at this issue even more. Like Ben mentioned at the beginning, CANSO will be putting on a webinar on the 9th of April, 12, starting at 12, looking at marketing and the application process for ANSP specifically. We also at Firstfruits will be in Lisbon at Airspace World doing the Future Skies Tomorrow's Voices initiative, which will be looking at this topic of passion even deeper. And then if you are on this call and you're representing an aviation organization and you want to be thinking about how can we set ourselves up for the future and how can we put these practices into our own organization, then please check out our Next Gen Insights and we can get in touch with you and further talk about this conversation. But we want to just give a big thank you to CANSO and IATA and GAST for helping promote this event. And also just to you guys, you are the ones that are going to be implementing it in your own organization. And it's your boldness and open-mindedness that will change the industry in the future. So we hope that you enjoy the rest of your days and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you all. Good day.
And we're done.